Milionaire helps the pregnant woman who was evicted. The sound of the hospital's siren echoed in Rowan Hayes' ears as she looked at the results of the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Positive. As an emergency room nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, she was used to delivering life-changing news, but now she was the one receiving it. Dr. Morrison in the emergency room. Dr. Morrison in the emergency room. The metallic voice from the loudspeaker brought her back to reality. Rowan put the test away in her bag and adjusted her light blue uniform, trying to keep her composure. At 26, an unplanned pregnancy was not in her plans, especially after Marcus, her boyfriend of 3 years, had disappeared at the first sign of a more serious commitment. 6 months passed quickly. The growing belly could no longer be hidden under hospital scrubs, and the double shifts were starting to take their toll. Rowan had saved as much as possible, but Boston was not a cheap city for a solo mother. The eviction notice on her apartment in Cambridge was the last straw. That October afternoon, as she walked along Commercial Street in the historic North End, the rain began to fall mercilessly. Rowan took shelter under the marquee of a cafe, a protective hand on her belly, watching the drops form puddles on the cobblestones. That's when a deep, gentle voice caught her attention. "You seem to need this more than I do." A tall man, with gray hair at his temples and an impeccable suit, held out an umbrella in her direction. Lane Thorne, although Rowan still didn't know his name, had piercing blue eyes that seemed to carry untold stories. "Thank you, but I can't accept," she replied, noticing the discreet Rolex on his wrist and the gold Thorne Enterprises brooch on his lapel. "I insist," he smiled, and something in his smile triggered a distant memory in Rowan, something she couldn't pinpoint. "By the way, there's an excellent cafe in here. Can I offer you a cup of hot chocolate? You look like you need to warm up." Under normal circumstances, Rowan would have refused. But there was something familiar about this stranger, a sense of security that she hadn't felt since her adoptive mother, Grace, had died the previous year. The interior of the cafe was welcoming, with exposed brick walls and the aroma of freshly ground coffee. Lane pulled out a chair for her, an old-fashioned gesture that matched her elegant posture. "Lane Thorne," he introduced himself, taking a seat opposite her. "And you are?" "Rowan Hayes," she replied, noticing how he seemed to freeze for a moment on hearing her surname. "Something wrong?" No. I just met someone with that last name a long time ago." He quickly regained his composure. "Are you from Boston?" "Actually, I grew up in foster homes until I was 6, when I was adopted by Grace Hayes in Providence." Rowan didn't know why he was sharing so much with a stranger, but something about him inspired confidence. Lane listened intently, his eyes occasionally straying to Rowan's belly. When she mentioned being a nurse, he seemed especially interested. "I'm expanding the pediatric ward at St. Catherine's Hospital in Newport," he commented. "We always need qualified professionals, and the benefits package includes housing in the hospital complex." Rowan almost knocked over his cup. Newport, Rhode Island, was only an hour south of Boston, and a new position with housing included seemed too good to be true. "Why are you helping me?" she asked directly. Lane paused, as if weighing his words. "Sometimes life gives you a second chance to do the right thing," he replied enigmatically, "even if we don't know exactly why." What Rowan didn't know, and Lane only suspected, was that 26 years earlier, he had been forced to give up his newborn daughter for adoption. A decision imposed by his dying father, who threatened to disinherit not only Lane, but also his younger sister, who depended on the expensive medical care provided by the family fortune. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the cafe, something was beginning to form. An inexplicable connection between two people whom fate had separated and now, through a series of coincidences, or perhaps not so coincidences, brought back together. "When could it start?" Lane asked, trying to keep his tone professional despite the emotion that threatened to show in his voice. Rowan looked out of the foggy window, observing the city that had been his home for the last few years. Boston held both sweet and bitter memories, but perhaps it was time for a new beginning. Her hand unconsciously caressed her belly, feeling a baby's gentle kick. "Right away," she replied, unaware that she was about to embark on a journey that would change not only her future, but also her understanding of family, forgiveness, and the power of unconditional love. The rain finally began to subside, but the conversation between father and daughter, still unaware of their true kinship, continued, filling the cafe with unspoken promises of new beginnings and second chances. The move to Newport happened faster than Rowan had imagined. In just a week, she found herself unpacking her few boxes in a cozy apartment in the St. Catherine's Hospital residential complex. The space, although modest, had a privileged view of the Atlantic Ocean, with its gray autumn waters lapping against Rhode Island's historic rocks. "Let me help you with this," Lane insisted, taking a heavy box from Rowan's hands. Ever since that meeting in the cafe in Boston, he had been present in a way that intrigued her. For a billionaire CEO, Lane Thorne showed an almost paternal concern that made her question his motives. "Mr. Thorne, you really don't have to," Rowan began, but was interrupted by his gentle smile. "Please, just call me Lane, and it's no trouble," he replied, placing the box on the kitchen counter. "Besides, I want to make sure you and the baby are settled in." There was something in his eyes when he mentioned the baby, a mixture of tenderness and melancholy that Rowan couldn't decipher. It was as if every interaction between them was loaded with hidden meanings, unspoken words hanging in the air like the sea mist that covered Newport that morning. St. Catherine's Hospital was an imposing structure that blended Victorian architecture with modernity. While touring the facilities with nursing supervisor Amanda Chun, Rowan realized she had made the right choice. The pediatric ward, in particular, was being completely renovated under Lane's personal supervision. "He's never been so involved in a project before," commented Amanda, as she showed Rowan around the new neonatal unit. "It's like a personal mission for him." Over the next few weeks, Rowan adapted to his new routine. Mornings started early, with the sound of seagulls and the salty scent of the sea wafting in through the window. Her rounds at the hospital were rewarding, and she discovered that Newport, with its gilded mansions and rich history, had a unique charm that Boston had never possessed. Lane often showed up at the hospital, always finding time to chat with her during his visits. On one particular afternoon, as they shared a coffee in the hospital garden, he began to talk about his past. "I was your age when I faced the most difficult decision of my life," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes the choices we make to protect those we love end up haunting us forever." Rowan felt a tightness in his chest, recognizing in it the same pain he carried about his own origins. "My foster mother used to say that some wounds only heal when you find the courage to face them," she replied softly. A movement in her belly made Rowan smile, bringing her hand to the spot. Lane watched the gesture with an intensity that made her blush. "May I?" he asked hesitantly, holding out his hand. When she nodded, he gently touched her belly, and the baby responded with a vigorous kick. "She's strong," Lane commented, withdrawing his hand as if he had been touched by an electric current. "She?" Rowan asked in surprise. "How do you know it's a girl?" "Just a hunch," he replied, but his smile trembled slightly. "Rowan, there's something I need to tell you." At that moment, Lane's beat sounded, interrupting what could have been a crucial revelation. He checked the message and his face changed. "I have to go. Emergency meeting with the council." As she watched him hurry away across the garden, Rowan couldn't help feeling that she was on the verge of discovering something important. The coincidences that had brought her there, the meeting in the rain, the job offer, Lane's constant presence, were beginning to form a pattern that she still couldn't fully understand. That night, alone in her apartment, Rowan found an old shoebox that held her few childhood memories. Among yellowed documents and faded photographs, there was her original birth certificate, with blank spaces where the names of her biological parents should have been. Her fingers traced the printed letters, while her mind went back to the expression in Lane's eyes earlier that day. The ocean wind blew through the open window, bringing with it the distant sound of the waves and promises of revelations that would change the course of their lives forever. In her belly, her daughter moved gently, as if she too sensed that great changes were to come. In the main office of Thorne Enterprises in Newport, Lane gazed at the yellowed photograph in his hands. The image showed a young woman holding a newborn baby, Madeline, his college sweetheart, and the daughter he had been forced to give up. The name, Hayes, on Rowan's birth certificate couldn't be a coincidence, but he needed to be sure before making any revelations. "Mr. Thorne, your sister Charlotte is on the line," his assistant announced over the intercom. Lane put the photograph away in the locked drawer of his desk. "Charlie, what a surprise," he answered, trying to keep his voice casual. "Lane, I've heard rumors about a new nurse at St. Catherine's." Charlotte got straight to the point. "A young pregnant woman called Hayes. Does that have anything to do with—" "Don't jump to conclusions," Lane interrupted her. But her mind went back to the moment she first saw Rowan in the rain. The same green eyes as Madeline. The same determined chin she saw every morning in the mirror. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Rowan was facing her own challenges. During his shift in the pediatric ward, a particular case caught his eye: a 12-year-old girl, Sophia, who had been abandoned in the emergency room with a high fever. "No emergency contact?" Rowan asked the social worker, Rachel Morrison. "Not yet. She doesn't talk much, but we found this in her backpack." Rachel showed a folded piece of paper with the name Foreign Enterprises handwritten on it. Rowan's heart raced. Another inexplicable connection with Lane Thorne. She decided to call him personally. "Sophia Martinez," Lane murmured into the phone, his voice laden with recognition. "Daughter of one of our employees who recently passed away. I'm on my way." When Lane arrived at the hospital, Rowan observed how he interacted with Sophia. The same kindness he showed her, the same protective gaze. The girl visibly relaxed in his presence. "My mother said that if anything happened, I should look for Mr. Thorne," Sophia explained softly. "She said he helped people like us." "And she was right," Lane replied, taking the girl's hand. Her eyes met Rowan's. "Some people come into our lives by chance, but they stay for a purpose." That evening, after his shift, Rowan met Lane in the hospital garden. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "How do you always seem to know when someone needs help?" she asked, taking a seat next to him. Lane hesitated before answering. "Maybe because I needed help once myself, but no one was there." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Rowan, have you ever looked for information about your birth parents?" The question took her by surprise. "Only what's on my birth certificate." "Why?" "Sometimes the past is a unique way of finding us," he replied enigmatically. 26 years ago, I met a woman called Madeline Hayes." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by Amanda Chun, running towards them. "Rowan, we need you in the emergency room. Sophia is having a crisis." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Sophia's condition stabilized, but the incident left Rowan physically and emotionally exhausted. When she finally got home, she found an envelope under her door. Inside was a letter from Lane. "There are stories that need to be told at the right time. When you're ready, there's something important I need to share with you." Rowan fell asleep with the letter beside her, dreaming of fragments of memories that were not her own. A young mother, a reluctant father, and decisions made in desperate times. In her belly, her daughter moved restlessly, as if sensing her mother's turbulent emotions. At the Thorne mansion, Lane spent sleepless nights looking at old photographs and documents. Charlotte was right. It couldn't be a coincidence. But how could she tell the truth without risking losing the trust she was building with Rowan? Fate had brought his daughter back into his life, but the timing for revelations had to be perfect. For now, he would continue to be her mentor, her silent protector, gathering courage for the moment when all the secrets would come out. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the corridors of St. Catherine's as Rowan rushed towards the neonatal ICU. A premature baby had just arrived, and his vital signs were critical. Her own movements were slower now, with the 7-month pregnancy limiting her agility, but the urgency of the situation drove her on. "Sats at 85% and falling," one of the residents reported, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to intubate the newborn. "Leave it to me." Rowan took control with the calm that years of experience had given her. His fingers moved with precision, and within seconds the baby was stabilized, his weak cries filling the room with relief. Amanda Chin watched from the doorway, a discreet smile on her lips. "That's why Lane was so insistent on bringing you onto our team," she commented, making notes on her clipboard. "He has a sixth sense for talent." The mention of Lane's name made Rowan think of the mysterious letter that was still on his bedside table. There was something about the way he looked at it, especially during his frequent visits to the pediatric ward, that seemed to carry the weight of undisclosed secrets. After his shift, Rowan found a notification on his cell phone, an invitation from Lane to dinner at his mansion that evening. "There are important matters we need to discuss," the message read. Her heart raced, remembering the interrupted conversation about Madeline Hayes. The Thor Mansion was an impressive building by the sea, reminiscent of the old summer houses in Newport. The chauffeur Lane had sent led her through ornate gates to a circular entrance with a central fountain. "Welcome," Lane greeted her at the door, wearing a navy blue sweater that brought out the color of her eyes. The same eyes that, Rowan was beginning to notice, were strangely similar to his own. The interior of the house was elegant but cozy, with large windows that framed the ocean. In the dining room, the table was set for two, but Lane led her first to his study on the second floor. "Before dinner, there's something I need to show you," he said, his voice betraying an unusual nervousness. From a locked drawer, he pulled out an old folder and a photograph. Rowan sat down, feeling the baby move restlessly in her belly, as if sensing the tension in the air. The photograph showed a young woman holding a newborn baby. The date on the back, 26 years ago. "This is Madeline Hayes," Lane began, his voice breaking. "But in Croatia, she was a scholarship student at Yale, studying literature. I was the rebellious heir to Thorn Enterprises." Rowan picked up the photograph with trembling hands. The woman had the same green eyes, the same face shape. "When she got pregnant, my father was dying of cancer," Lane continued. "He threatened to cut off not only my inheritance, but also the fund that paid for my younger sister Charlotte's experimental treatment." Madeline, his voice faltered. She understood the impossibility of the situation. "We decided to give the baby up for adoption." The world seemed to spin around Rowan. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Lane's interest in his life, the coincidences, the feeling of familiarity. "I've looked for years," Lane said softly. "When you mentioned your surname that day in the rain, I had a DNA test done discreetly with the coffee cup he used. The results came back yesterday." Rowan stood up abruptly, staggering slightly. Lane moved to support her, but she held up a hand, keeping her distance. "All this time, the job, the apartment," her voice trembled. "Was it all planned?" "No," Lane answered quickly. "The meeting was genuine. But when I suspected who you were, I couldn't let you get away again." "What about my mother?" "Madeline?" Rowan asked, dreading the answer. Lane's face darkened with pain. "She died in a car accident 2 years after she was born. She was on her way to Yale, where she had started teaching." Rowan moved closer to the window, watching the sun set over the ocean. Her hands rested on her protruding belly, thinking of her own daughter to come, of the choices parents make, of the circumstances that shape destinies. "I understand why they did what they did," she finally said, turning to Lane. "Grace, my adoptive mother, gave me a wonderful life. But it still hurts," Lane added softly. "Every day for the last 26 years, I've wondered where you were, if you were happy, if I'd ever get the chance to meet you." The silence that followed was filled with the sound of waves crashing on the rocks below. Father and daughter studied each other, seeing each other's reflections in gestures and expressions they had never noticed before. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately," Lane said, "or to accept me as a father. All I'm asking for is the chance to be part of your life and my granddaughter's life, if you'll let me." Rowan felt a tear run down his cheek. "I think we could start with that dinner," she replied with a small smile. As they walked down to the dining room, they both knew that this was just the first of many difficult conversations to come. But it was also the start of something new, a chance to heal old wounds and build bridges over the chasm that 2 decades of separation had created. News of Rowan's true identity spread quickly through the inner circles of the Thorn family. Charlotte, the aunt she still didn't know, showed up unannounced at her apartment door one Thursday morning, carrying a box of cupcakes from a local bakery and years of unresolved guilt. "I helped convince Lane to do the adoption," Charlotte confessed, sitting at Rowan's kitchen table. Her long, elegant fingers played nervously with her napkin. "I was 16 and needed a very expensive experimental treatment. Your grandfather, well, he wasn't exactly a compassionate man." Rowan observed the woman in front of him. Dark hair like Lane's, but with early gray streaks at the temples. There was a fragility to Charlotte that contrasted with the strength that radiated from her brother. "I'm not here to judge past decisions," Rowan replied, pouring tea for them both. "But I need to understand everything. The cancer I had less than a 20% chance of survival without treatment," Charlotte continued. "Lane sacrificed his chance of being a father to keep me alive. I've carried that weight for all these years." The baby kicked, as it always did when Rowan was emotionally agitated. Charlotte noticed the movement, and her eyes filled with tears. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand hesitantly. When Rowan nodded, Charlotte touched her belly reverently. "A Thorn girl. Lane must be on cloud 9. We're still getting to know each other." Rowan chose her words carefully. "It's complicated. Life is rarely simple in our family." Charlotte smiled sadly. "But Lane, he never gave up on finding you. He has an entire room in the mansion with files from private investigators he's hired over the years." Before they could continue the conversation, Rowan's phone rang. It was an emergency at the hospital. Charlotte insisted on giving her a lift, and during the journey, she continued filling in the gaps of 2 decades of family history. At the hospital, Rowan found Lane already waiting in the emergency room. Sophia, the girl they had helped weeks before, had returned with complications. "Pneumonia," Lane explained, his concern evident. "The doctors want to do a lung biopsy." Watching Rowan work with Sophia, Lane couldn't contain his pride. Her daughter had inherited not only her eyes, but also her determination and compassion. "You'll be fine," Rowan assured Sophia, holding her hand while the doctors prepared the sedation. "When you wake up, I'll be here. Promise." Sophia's voice was small and frightened. "I promise. And you know what? Mr. Thorne will be too." Lane, watching from the doorway, felt his heart squeeze. In just a few weeks, Rowan had become indispensable not only to the hospital, but to everyone who knew her. After the procedure, while Sophia slept, Lane found Rowan in the doctor's room. "I remember when you were that age," he said softly. "Madeline sent a photo of you anonymously. You were on a swing laughing. It was the only photo I've received in all these years." Rowan stopped writing in his chart, his hand shaking slightly. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want you to understand that there's never been a day when I didn't think of you," Lane replied. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every achievement I imagined you might have. And now," Rowan asked, finally turning to face him, "what happens now that you've found me?" "Now," Lane smiled gently, "now we can create new memories. If you want." The moment was interrupted by Amanda Chun, bringing Sophia's biopsy results. "We need to operate," she announced. "And Rowan, we want you on a team." The next few hours were intense. Sophia's surgery was successful, but it left everyone emotionally exhausted. When it was finally over, it was already dawn. Lane insisted on taking Rowan home. In the car, the silence between them was comfortable, full of unspoken promises of new beginnings. "You know," Rowan said when they arrived, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." "What?" "Do you want to be the first to know your granddaughter's name?" Lane's eyes glistened with restrained tears. "I'd be honored." "Madeline," Rowan said softly. "I'll call her Madeline Grace." Lane couldn't hold back the tears this time. In a spontaneous gesture, she hugged her daughter for the first time in 26 years. And there, in the soft light of dawn, father and daughter began to weave the first threads of a new family story. As winter approached Newport, Rowan's life changed as quickly as the landscape around him. The adjustment to the idea of Lane as his biological father progressed in small moments. A coffee shared before the shift, a text message asking about his day, professional advice that now carried a different weight. One particularly busy morning at St. Catherine's brought an unexpected surprise. Rowan was updating records when an elegant middle-aged woman walked into her office without knocking. "So you're her," said the woman, her critical eyes scanning Rowan from head to toe. "I'm Victoria Thorne, technically your paternal grandmother." Rowan felt her heart race. Victoria Thorne was a legendary figure in Newport, known as much for her philanthropy as for her sharp tongue. After her husband's death, she had transformed Thorne Enterprises into an even larger empire. "Lane didn't mention you were coming," Rowan replied, trying to keep her composure. Lane doesn't know I'm here, Victoria approached, her Louboutin heels echoing on the floor. I needed to see for myself the girl who was turning our world upside down. Before Rowan could reply, a sudden contraction made her grip the table for balance. Victoria's expression changed instantly from criticism to concern. How long between contractions? She asked, reaching for her cell phone. They're not real contractions, Rowan tried to minimize, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. It's too soon, honey, I've had 3 children. I know labor when I see one. Victoria was already dialing. Lane, come to the hospital now. Your daughter is in premature labor. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Sarah Chun, a specialist in high-risk pregnancy, confirmed that Rowan was in early labor. At 32 weeks gestation, every hour they could delay the birth was crucial. Lane arrived in record time, finding her mother and daughter in the hospital room. The surreal moment of seeing the 3 Thorne generations reunited didn't escape any of them. It shouldn't be happening like this, Rowan whispered, tears streaming down her face as another contraction hit her. Hey, look at me. Lane held up his hand. You're a Thorne. We face storms head-on. Victoria, watching the scene, felt something melt in her heart. Your mother, Madeline, was just like that. Strong even when she was scared, she commented softly. She should have helped you back then, instead of taking your grandfather's side. The unexpected confession silenced the room. Lane looked at her mother in surprise. Victoria Thorne never admitted mistakes. The next few hours were tense. The medical team managed to stabilize the contractions, but Rowan would need to be on bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. The prospect of weeks confined to a hospital bed frightened her. You can stay at the mansion, Victoria announced, her tone brooking no argument. I have private nurses on duty 24 hours a day, and all the necessary equipment is already being installed. Mom, I don't think, Lane began, but Rowan interrupted him. Actually, it would be nice not to be alone, she admitted. Her apartment, although cozy, suddenly seemed too lonely to face this situation. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Excellent. Lane, arrange the transfer. I'll prepare the blue room. It has the best view of the ocean. When they were alone, Rowan looked at Lane curiously. Is her mother always like this? Intense? Victoria Thorne doesn't do anything by halves, he laughed. But underneath all that posing, she really cares. I think seeing you made her realize how much we've lost because of family pride. That night, settled in the luxurious bedroom of the Thorne mansion, Rowan watched the ocean through the French windows. The sound of the waves had a calming effect, and for the first time in weeks, she felt truly safe. Victoria appeared with a tray of tea and homemade cookies. I found these today, she said, handing over an old photo album. They're pictures from college of Lane and Madeline. The pages revealed a story of young, hopeful love. Lane and Madeline at parties, studying in the library, walking around campus. In every photo, the love between them was palpable. She was extraordinary, Victoria sighed. Maybe if I'd been braver, stood up to Harold, things might have been different. We're here now, Rowan replied softly, and Madeline Jr. will have her whole family around her. Victoria took his hand, squeezing it gently. Yes, she will. Now get some rest, darling. Tomorrow begins a new phase for all of us. Outside the room, Lane listened to the conversation with a full heart. Her family, fragmented for so long, was finally beginning to heal, and in a few weeks, a new Thorne would arrive to complete the circle. The blue bedroom of the Thorne mansion became a peculiar refuge for Rowan over the next few weeks. Between heart monitors and state-of-the-art medical devices, Victoria had managed to create an environment that blended elegance and functionality. The walls in soft shades of navy blue matched the silk curtains that danced in the ocean breeze, while discreetly positioned medical equipment reminded us that this was no ordinary rest period. Your pressure levels are fine today, commented Monica, the private nurse, as she made her morning notes. But we still need to keep you on strict bed rest for at least another 2 weeks. Rowan nodded, his hand unconsciously stroking the belly where Madeline Jr., as Victoria had come to call her, was moving restlessly. Forced bed rest was a challenge for someone used to the hustle and bustle of the emergency room. But every day they managed to postpone the birth was a victory. Lane had turned one of the adjacent rooms into his temporary office, conducting most of Thorne Enterprises' business from there. Rowan often heard him on video conference calls, his authoritative voice softening whenever he needed to interrupt a meeting to check on her. "I found this in the old stuff in the attic." Lane entered the room that afternoon, carrying a carved wooden box. "It belonged to your mother." Inside the box, Rowan found a diary, postcards, and a series of letters that had never been sent, all addressed to her. "Madeline wrote them during her pregnancy," Lane explained, taking a seat on the edge of the bed. "She planned to give them to you when you turn 18, but after the accident." Rowan's hands trembled as he opened the first letter. The handwriting was delicate, almost musical. "My dear child, as I write this, you are moving inside me, as if you wanted to take part in this moment. There is so much I want to tell you, so much I need to explain. The choices we are making, your father and I, are not for lack of love." A sudden contraction interrupted the reading, causing Rowan to let out a groan of pain. Lane immediately hit the emergency button, and within seconds Monica was back in the room. "Contractions every 8 minutes," the nurse announced after a quick assessment. "I'll get Dr. Chen." Victoria appeared in the doorway, her normally composed face betraying concern. "The helicopter is on standby if we need to transfer you to Boston," she informed, already taking control of the situation as only a Thorne could. The next few hours were a battle against time. Dr. Chen once again managed to stabilize the contractions, but the warning was clear. Any additional stress could trigger labor. "Maybe we should wait to read the rest," Lane suggested gently, noting how Rowan was still holding Madeline's letter. "No," she replied firmly. "I need to know her. I need to understand." Lane adjusted the pillows behind her and began to read aloud. "Your father is an extraordinary man, even if circumstances have forced him to make difficult choices. He has the same smile as you. I can already see it in the ultrasounds. And he has a bigger heart than he realizes." Victoria, who had stood silently by the door, entered the room and sat down in the armchair by the window. "She was right about that," she commented softly. "Lane was always the best of all of us." "Why did you change your mind about me?" Rowan asked Victoria, surprising everyone with the direct question. "At first you seemed resistant." Victoria considered the question for a moment, her elegant fingers adjusting the pearl necklace she always wore. "Because I saw in your eyes the same strength I saw in Madeline. And because," she hesitated, something rare for Victoria Thorne, "because I realized that the time had come to correct the mistakes of the past." A meaningful silence filled the room, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the heart monitor and the waves breaking on the beach below. 3 generations of Thornes, each carrying their own scars and hopes, united by fate and the imminent arrival of a fourth. "There's one more thing," Lane said, taking a yellowed envelope out of the box. "It's Madeline's will. She left something to you." Rowan opened the envelope carefully, revealing the deed to a house in Providence, the same town where he had grown up with Grace. "She bought the property before the accident," Lane explained. "It was supposed to be a place where you could meet again one day." "Fate has an interesting sense of humor," Victoria commented, a small smile playing on her lips. "You grew up so close to us, and yet we need a storm and a chance meeting to reconnect," Rowan added, feeling the baby move, as if in agreement. Lane held his daughter's hand, noticing how she had the same long pianist's fingers as Madeline. "Some stories need the right time to be told," he said softly. "And some families need the right time to find each other." The medical monitors were blinking softly in the blue room when a knock on the door interrupted the reading of Madeline's letters. Charlotte entered carrying an old shoebox, her face marked by an unusual determination. "I found these in the Foundation's storeroom," she announced, taking a seat next to Rowan's bed. "They're records of the projects Madeline had planned for the Children's Hospital before the accident." Lane immediately recognized the handwriting on the outside of the box. "St. Catherine's was her dream," he explained to Rowan. "She wanted to create a space where no family had to choose between medical treatment and financial stability." Inside the box, yellowed architectural plans showed an ambitious project, an entire wing dedicated to experimental treatments, with accommodation for patients' families and a scholarship program for nurses. That's exactly what we're building now, Rowan realized, his voice laced with emotion. Lane, you're making her dream come true. With your help, Victoria added from the armchair by the window. It's no coincidence that our best nurse is Madeline's daughter. A slight contraction made Rowan adjust herself on the bed, and immediately 3 pairs of eyes turned to her with concern. I'm fine, she assured them. Madeline Jr. is just restless today. Like your mother, Charlotte smiled. Madeline could never sit still, always planning the next project, the next move. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor announced the arrival of Monica, the nurse, bringing the results of the latest tests. Dr. Chen wants to discuss some changes to your treatment, she informed, adjusting the fetal monitor. While Monica explained the new procedures, Rowan leafed through the documents in the box. Among the plans and proposals, she found an envelope addressed to my love. With a questioning glance at Lane, who nodded softly, she opened it. Dear Lane, if you're reading this, it means that something has happened to me. But it also means that our greatest treasure is still out there, somewhere, carrying a little bit of both of us in its heart. The letter went on to detail Madeline's dreams for the hospital and for the daughter they had to deliver. Every word was a testament to the love that never had a chance to fully blossom. Promise me that if you ever meet her, you'll tell her about the stars, the letter asked. About how we used to watch them from the roof of the library, making plans to change the world. Tell her that every decision we made was out of love, even the ones that hurt the most. Victoria, who rarely showed emotion, discreetly wiped away a tear. Madeline had that gift, she commented, to see the best in people, even when they didn't see it in themselves. Like you, Lane added, looking at Rowan. The way you look after the patients, especially Sophia, that's exactly how she would be. An idea began to form in Rowan's mind. Her project for the hospital? What if we expanded it? Not just for experimental treatments, but a complete family support program. Charlotte was already making notes on her tablet. We could call it the Madeline Project, she suggested. A legacy that would continue through the generations. And it could start with Sophia, Rowan continued, animation coloring her voice. She needs a family, stability, to fully recover. She's already thinking like a thorn, Victoria smiled proudly. Always expanding horizons. Always thinking about the next step. Lane watched the scene with a full heart. In just a few weeks, her daughter had not only become part of the family, but was helping to fulfill the dreams that Madeline had never been able to see come true. There's something else I need to show you, he said, getting up, but it'll have to wait until we can get you out of this room safely. The observatory, Charlotte guessed, exchanging a complicit glance with her brother. Madeline's favorite spot on the estate, Victoria explained to Rowan. Lane kept it exactly as she left it. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chun for the evening assessment. While the doctor examined Rowan, the family retired to the hallway, each carrying thoughts of the past that was finally finding its way into the present. In the silence of the blue room, Rowan held Madeline's letter against her chest, feeling her daughter move as if responding to the moment. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky beyond the window, the same stars that her mother and father used to watch, dreaming of a future that, somehow, was finally coming true. A storm was brewing over Newport when the first serious pains began. Rowan was alone in the blue room, watching the lightning illuminate the raging ocean, when she felt the first really strong contraction. Unlike the previous ones, this one went through her body like a shockwave, making her grip the sheets tightly. "Monica," she called out, but her voice came out weaker than she had intended. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m., and the storm drowned out any sound she could make. With trembling hands, she reached for the cell phone on the bedside table. Lane answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting the call. "It's happening," was all she managed to say before another contraction hit her. Within minutes, the blue room was transformed into a makeshift command center. Lane had practically set up an entire neonatal ICU there over the last few weeks, anticipating exactly this moment. Dr. Chun, who was sleeping in one of the mansion's guest rooms, was already assessing the situation. 34 weeks, she murmured, checking the monitors. "It's not ideal, but the baby's lungs are mature enough thanks to the corticosteroids we've administered." Victoria coordinated a team of nurses and technicians who arrived discreetly through the mansion's back entrance, while Charlotte organized the necessary documents for a possible emergency transfer. Remember what we talked about breathing? Monica instructed Rowan, holding his hand. Focus on my voice. Between the increasingly frequent contractions, Rowan picked up fragments of conversations around her. The storm had closed the airport, making it impossible to use the helicopter. It would take too long for the ground ambulance to reach the nearest hospital with a neonatal ICU. We're going to have to do it right here, Dr. Chen decided after checking the dilation once more. The baby is determined to be born now. Lane seemed torn between panic and the need to stay strong for his daughter. Are you sure we have everything we need here? You've turned this room into a hospital, son, Victoria replied, already wearing a surgical mask. Madeline will be born in the same place where her grandmother was born almost 80 years ago. The mention of her maternal grandmother made Rowan reach for Madeline's letters, which were still on her bedside table. Lane, she called out between gasping breaths. Promise you'll read them all to her? That you'll tell her about the stars? I promise, he held her hand, unshed tears shining in his eyes. And we'll create new stories to tell too. The next few hours became a synchronized dance of medical professionals, sophisticated equipment, and a family united by extraordinary circumstances. Charlotte was in constant contact with St. Catherine's, where Sophia was anxiously awaiting news about her sister baby, as she had begun to call Rowan's daughter. One more time, Dr. Chen instructed. You're almost there. With one last heroic effort, Rowan brought her daughter into the world. The cry, although not very loud, was the most beautiful sound anyone in the room had ever heard. Madeline Grace Thorne, Lane announced, his voice broken, as the medical team carried out the first procedures. Welcome to the family, little one. Victoria, normally so composed, wept openly as she watched her great-granddaughter being placed in a state-of-the-art incubator, equipment she herself had provided weeks earlier. She's got her mother's eyes, Charlotte commented softly, noticing how the newborn, even though premature, was already showing the hallmarks of the Thorne family. The storm outside was beginning to subside, as if it had fulfilled its role of keeping everyone together for this moment. The first rays of the morning sun were beginning to penetrate through the windows of the blue room, creating a spectacle of light over the still churning ocean. There's something I need to show you, Lane said to Rowan, once everything had stabilized. With Monica's help, he brought a wheelchair close to the bed. But I can't get up yet, Rowan protested weakly. Trust me, he smiled, that smile she now recognized as her own. With extreme care, and after Dr. Chen's approval, they helped her into the chair. Lane led her through a corridor to a door she had never noticed before. When she opened it, Rowan lost her breath. It was the observatory Charlotte had mentioned, a glass dome with a panoramic view of the sky and the ocean. On the walls, black and white photographs showed a young Madeline Hayes, smiling at the camera with an old telescope. This was her favorite place, Lane explained, positioning Rowan's chair under the dome. She said that here, under the stars, everything seemed possible, even the most unlikely beginnings, Rowan added, remembering the words in her mother's letters. The sun was fully up now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the blue room, their daughter, the youngest Thorne generation, was beginning her own journey, protected by the love of a family that fate had brought together in unexpected ways. 2 weeks after Madeline's dramatic birth, the routine at Thorne Manor had settled into a new rhythm. The blue room, now transformed into a luxurious nursery, housed the family's smallest heiress as she gained strength to finally go home. The results are excellent, Dr. Chen announced during her morning visit, examining Madeline's latest tests. She's responding better than expected for a premature baby. Rowan, who spent most of her time in a recliner next to the incubator, smiled at the news. The recovery from her own surgery was progressing well, allowing her to take an active part in caring for her daughter. I think she's drawn on the Thorne resilience, Lane commented, entering the room with a pile of documents. And speaking of Thorne, there's something we need to discuss. Victoria and Charlotte joined them, creating a small impromptu family council around the incubator. Lane held out the papers to Rowan, legal documents with the Thorne Enterprises letterhead. "These are succession documents," he explained. "I want to make it official that you and Madeline are the rightful heirs to the company and the foundation." Rowan felt the weight of family history on the pages in front of her. "Lane, this is too much. We've barely known each other for a few months." "But you're my daughter," he replied firmly. "And more importantly, you understand the vision Madeline, your mother, had for the future of St. Catherine's. I can't think of anyone better to carry on that legacy." Victoria snorted softly, attracting everyone's attention. "There's one more thing," she said, removing a velvet box from her handbag. "This belonged to your grandmother, my mother. She left specific instructions for it to be given to the first great-granddaughter of the family." Inside the box, a delicate necklace of sapphires and diamonds sparkled in the morning light. "It's known as the Tears of the Ocean," Victoria explained. "It's been in the family for 5 generations." "How would she know?" Rowan asked, touching the stones gently. "Your grandmother always said that some things are written in the stars," Charlotte smiled. "Like the fact that you found your way back to us." A soft sound from the incubator interrupted the moment. Madeline had woken up and was watching the scene with curious eyes, as green as those of her mother and grandmother. "Speaking of finding ways," Lane began, "Sophia asked if she could visit today. The doctors gave the go-ahead, considering she's completely recovered from her surgery." The mention of Sophia brought an even bigger smile to Rowan's face. During her own recovery, she had begun the process of becoming the girl's legal guardian, with the full support of the Thorne family. "Her room is ready," Victoria informed her. "The one next to yours in the annex of the mansion. I thought you'd like to be close when you're discharged." Rowan looked at the family matriarch in surprise. "You want us to live here?" "This is your home now," Victoria replied with an unusual softness in her voice. "Besides, someone needs to keep Lane in line. He's been impossible since he became a grandfather." The comment provoked laughter in the group, especially as Lane was at that moment leaning over the incubator, making faces to make his granddaughter smile. "We have a lot of rebuilding to do," he admitted, straightening up. "But we also have time now, and resources to fulfill the dreams Madeline had for the hospital." Charlotte already had her tablet in hand, showing the updated plans for the Madeline project, the expansion of St. Catherine's that would include not only the renovated pediatric ward, but also a support center for families in vulnerable situations. "Sophia will be our first official resident," she explained, "a pilot program that we hope to expand to help other children in similar situations." The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Monica's arrival with more test results. "Sorry to interrupt," she smiled, "but I think we have more good news. The latest tests indicate that Madeline could be discharged in 3 days." The news was greeted with a mixture of joy and apprehension. Leaving the safety of the Blue Room meant facing the real world. The press, who would surely be interested in the story of the lost Thorne heiress, the responsibilities that would come with the new role in the company, the challenges of integrating Sophia into the family. One thing at a time, Lane seemed to read her thoughts. "First, let's get our little girl home. The rest we'll sort out together." Victoria approached the incubator, watching her great-granddaughter with watery eyes. "You know, Madeline, your mother, used to say that the greatest blessings come disguised as storms." I think she was right. At that moment, as if answering her great-grandmother, little Madeline opened a toothless smile that lit up the whole room. It was a smile that carried promises of bright futures and stories yet to be told. The day Madeline was discharged from hospital dawned with a golden glow typical of Newport. Sophia arrived early at the Thorne mansion, carrying a teddy bear almost bigger than herself, a present she had carefully chosen for her new sister. "Can we take her to see the garden today?" Sophia asked anxiously, as she helped Rowan organize the last few things in the Blue Room. "First, we need to go through Dr. Chun," Rowan smiled, adjusting the little dress that Victoria had made especially for the occasion. "But yes, today Madeline is going to see your house." Lane appeared at the door, wearing an impeccable suit despite the early hour. "The council is meeting," he announced. "They want to officially meet the new Thorne heiresses." The news made Rowan freeze momentarily. Since the presentation of the succession papers, she had been struggling to reconcile her identity as a dedicated nurse with her new role as heiress to a business empire. "It doesn't have to be today," Lane added quickly, noticing her hesitation. We can wait until you feel ready. No, Rowan replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Today is about new beginnings, isn't it? Let's do this right. Victoria entered the room at that moment, carrying the tears of the ocean necklace in her hands. I thought you might like to wear this today, she said, helping Rowan put it on. Your grandmother used to say that these sapphires carry the strength of all the thorn women who came before us. As they prepared for the meeting, Charlotte coordinated a small team that transformed the mansion's winter garden into a welcoming space to welcome Madeline on her first day at home. The old Victorian conservatory had been renovated with comfortable furniture and discreetly positioned medical equipment, a smooth transition from hospital to home. The board members are arriving, Monica reported, after checking Madeline's last vital signs. And Dr. Chan is already on her way for the final assessment. The board meeting was surprisingly intimate. The directors of Thorne Enterprises, many of whom had worked with Rowan's grandfather, watched with genuine interest as Lane formally introduced his daughter and granddaughter. The future of the company, he declared, is not just in our investments or expansions. It lies in our commitment to the legacy of care and compassion that Madeline Hayes dreamed up for St. Catherine's. Rowan, holding her daughter in her arms for the first time outside the incubator, felt the weight of the responsibility and opportunity that lay ahead. I intend to honor not only the Thorne name, she told the board, but especially the work my mother started. The presentation of the expanded project to the hospital was met with unanimous approval. The story of Sophia, who watched everything quietly at Charlotte's side, served as a perfect example of the need for a more comprehensive family support program. Every child deserves a chance, Rowan continued, exchanging a meaningful glance with her future adopted daughter. Just like I had, thanks to Grace Hayes, and now again, thanks to the Thorne family. After the meeting, as the family gathered in the winter garden for the first truly private moment of the day, Victoria surprised everyone with an announcement. I found these in the old boxes in the attic, she said, revealing a photo album that no one had seen before. These are photos of the original construction of St. Catherine's. And look who's here. The photograph showed a young Grace Hayes, Rowan's adoptive mother, working as a volunteer during the construction of the hospital. Next to her, a pregnant Madeline Hayes was smiling at the camera. Did they know each other? Rowan asked, her voice barely containing her emotion. More than that, Victoria explained softly. Grace was one of the first people Madeline confided in when she found out she was pregnant. She promised to keep an eye on you in case anything happened. The revelation hit Rowan like a wave. Her adoption by Grace hadn't been a coincidence. It had been the last promise kept from one friend to another. Lane moved closer, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. Some stories take decades to be completely told, he said, but each part has its purpose. Sophia, who had been quiet throughout the revelation, finally spoke up. So we really are a family? All the parts fit together? Yes, dear, Rowan replied, pulling the girl close with his free arm, while Madeline slept peacefully in his other arm. Some families are formed by blood, others by choice, and the most special ones are formed by both. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to establishing new routines. Monica helped organize Madeline's room, while Charlotte and Sophia decorated the adjacent space that would be the girls' new bedroom. Victoria supervised everything with her keen eye for detail, occasionally stopping to admire her 3 generations of offspring gathered under one roof. Adapting to the new routine at the Thorne Mansion brought unexpected challenges. One particularly hectic morning, Rowan found Lane in the observatory, gazing at old photographs spread out on a mahogany table. I couldn't sleep, he explained, noticing her presence. I found these photos from the day I met Madeline. It was a lecture on astrophysics at Yale. She was sitting in the front row, asking more questions than all the other students put together. Rowan approached, observing the dark-haired young woman with a determined look that was his biological mother. In the photo, Madeline was holding a book on constellations, the same one that now occupied a place of honor in the mansion's library. The Madeline project is ready to begin, Charlotte announced, entering the observatory with a folder of documents. The board approved the expanded budget, and we already have 5 families identified for the pilot program. The news brought a smile to Rowan's lips. The program, inspired by Sophia's story, would offer housing and full medical support to families with children undergoing treatment at St. Catherine's. Speaking of Sophia, Victoria appeared at the door. She's helping Monica prepare Madeline for her first official appointment at the hospital. That little girl has a natural gift for looking after babies. The comment provoked a wave of emotion in Rowan. Sophia's adoption process was progressing rapidly. Thanks to the Thorns' influence and the obvious connection between her and the girl. I found something interesting in the Foundation's archives, Charlotte continued, pulling a yellow document out of her briefcase. It's a letter of recommendation that Madeline wrote to Grace Hayes, supporting her application to the hospital's nursing program. So it wasn't just the adoption, Rowan muttered, picking up the letter carefully. Grace followed in Madeline's footsteps even at the hospital. Your adoptive mother kept her promise in every way possible, Lane commented, his voice laden with gratitude. Not only did she take care of you, but she also continued the work that Madeline had started. A soft cry coming from the baby monitor interrupted the conversation. Madeline was awake, and from the sound of it, hungry. Rowan went to the bedroom, where she found Sophia already nursing the little one. I taught her a lullaby, she explained proudly. The one you used to sing to me in hospital. The moment was captured by Victoria, who silently photographed every meaningful family interaction, creating a new album of memories to replace the lost years. Dr. Morrison called, Monica reported, entering the room. He wants to discuss the possibility of expanding the Madeline project to include a research program into experimental pediatric treatments. The mention of the research project reminded Rowan of another document he had found among his mother's things, a draft proposal for a Center for Advanced Studies in Pediatric Medicine. She thought of everything, Lane commented, watching her daughter breastfeed Madeline. Every aspect of the hospital we're building now, she had already visualized decades ago. And now we have the chance to make her dreams come true, Charlotte added, already making notes on her tablet. With a few updates of the 21st century, of course. The morning progressed with preparations for the hospital visit. St. Catherine's had become a symbol of new beginnings for the family. The place where past and present met, where old promises were fulfilled and new dreams took shape. We need to stop by the observatory before we leave, Lane suggested when everyone was ready. There's a tradition I want to start. At the observatory, he turned on the old telescope that Madeline loved so much. Every great journey deserves a guiding star, he explained, adjusting the instrument. Your mother used to say that the stars are silent witnesses to our promises. Victoria, watching the scene, smiled approvingly. Some traditions are worth keeping, she commented, adjusting the sapphire necklace around Rowan's neck, especially those that connect us to the ones we love. Little Madeline, safe in her mother's arms, gazed with fascination at the telescope, her green eyes, so similar to those of the grandmother she had never met, shining with curiosity. For many new beginnings under the same stars, Lane proposed, his voice laced with the emotion of the moment. It was a new chapter in the Thorn story, written not just with ink and paper, but with love, forgiveness, and the promise of a future built on the dreams of the past. 3 months after Madeline's arrival at the Thorn Mansion, St. Catherine's Hospital celebrated the official opening of the first phase of the Madeline Project. The main auditorium was packed with staff, beneficiaries, and members of the medical community, all eager to witness the realization of a dream that began decades ago. Rowan adjusted her Tears of the Ocean necklace as she went over her speech. As director of the new program, she would be the first to speak, representing not only the Thorns, but also the legacy of 2 extraordinary women, Madeline and Grace Hayes. Are you nervous? Lane asked, approaching with Madeline in her arms. The baby, now 3 months old, looked especially elegant in a dress that matched her grandfather's suit. A little, Rowan admitted, smiling as she saw Sophia helping Victoria arrange the last flowers on stage. The girls' adoption had been finalized the week before, making official what their hearts had known for months. I found something this morning, Charlotte said, entering the makeshift dressing room with a yellowed envelope. It's a letter Madeline wrote to the hospital board, defending the need for a program like this. The letter, dated a few days before the fatal accident, detailed a vision that was now finally taking shape. Rowan recognized passages that he had unconsciously incorporated into his own proposal for the project. "The stars guide us in mysterious ways," Monica commented, entering to inform him that the auditorium was ready. As head nurse of the new program, she had become an indispensable part of the Thorne family. The event began with a video showing the history of St. Catherine's, including recently discovered photos of Madeline and Grace working together in the early days of the hospital. The audience fell completely silent when Rowan took to the stage. 26 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite her emotion. Two extraordinary women shared a dream. They believed that quality medical care should not be a privilege but a right, that no family should have to choose between treatment and financial stability. Lane watched her daughter with undisguised pride, recognizing in her posture the same strength she so admired in Madeline. Victoria, sitting in the front row with Madeline Jr. on her lap, discreetly wiped away tears. "Today," Rowan continued, "we're not just inaugurating a new hospital wing. We are inaugurating a concept of holistic care, where we treat not just the illness but the whole family. Where every child has the chance to heal surrounded by love and support." Sophia, now officially a Thorne, stood up to introduce the first group of families selected for the program. Each story echoed her own journey: children facing complex medical challenges, families fighting to maintain hope. "The Madeline Project," Charlotte explained to the audience, "offers not only medical treatment, but housing, educational support, and work opportunities for parents. It's a pioneering program that we hope will serve as a model for hospitals across the country." After the formal ceremony, the family gathered in the hospital's new therapeutic garden, a serene space inspired by the observatory at Thorne Manor. A modern telescope, a special donation from Lane, would allow young patients to explore the same stars that so fascinated Madeline. "Your mother would be proud," Lane said softly to Rowan, as they watched Sophia show the telescope to some of the children in the program. "Not just of the project, but of the incredible woman you've become." Victoria approached, still carrying Madeline. And speaking of pride, she smiled. "I think someone wants to be part of this historic moment." The baby, as if she understood the importance of the occasion, offered one of her brightest smiles. "Sometimes I wonder," Rowan reflected, cradling her daughter in her arms, "if all this wasn't orchestrated somehow." The meeting in the rain, Sophia, even the storm on the day Madeline was born. "Your mother always said that the universe has its own timing," Charlotte commented, joining the group. "That some stories need time to find their way." Monica came up with some surprising news. Dr. Morrison has just confirmed 3 hospitals have already shown interest in implementing programs similar to the Madeline Project. The news was greeted with emotional smiles. Madeline Hayes' dream had not only come true, but was about to expand beyond Newport, touching lives she had never met, but somehow always knew she would help. On Madeline Jr.'s first birthday, the Thorne Mansion glowed with a celebration that was both a tribute to the past and a promise for the future. The observatory, now restored to its original glory, had been transformed into a small planetarium for the occasion, with constellations projected onto the vaulted ceiling. "It's exactly as your mother would have planned," Lane commented, watching Rowan adjust the birthday girl's dress, a miniature replica of the one Madeline Hayes wore in the photo from the day she met Lane at Yale. The Madeline Project had exceeded all expectations in its first year. 15 families had already gone through the program, and 3 new hospitals on the East Coast had implemented adapted versions of the initiative. Sophia, now 13, had become a sort of youth ambassador for the project, sharing her story with other children in similar situations. "Dr. Morrison has just arrived with the latest statistics," Charlotte announced, entering the observatory with her inseparable tablet. "The recovery rate for the program's patients is 40% higher than the national average." Victoria, who was overseeing the final preparations for the party, smiled approvingly. "Numbers are important," she said, "but look around. This is real success." She gestured to the families who were beginning to arrive, each with their own story of healing and hope. Monica, now the program's director of nursing, had organized a special presentation, a video documenting the first year of Madeline Jr.'s life alongside the growth of the project that bore her grandmother's name. "I found this morning," Rowan told Lane, handing her a worn envelope. It was Madeline's last letter, never opened before, addressed to our daughter, on the day she understands her legacy. Lane held the envelope with trembling hands. "Do you want me to read it?" Rowan nodded, settling Madeline on his lap. Sophia sat next to her, holding her free hand. Victoria and Charlotte approached, forming an intimate circle in the midst of a celebration. "My dear child," Lane began to read, his voice breaking. "If you are reading this, it means that you have found your way back to the family that fate forced us to leave. I don't know how long it will take, weeks, years, decades perhaps, but I always knew this day would come." The letter went on, detailing not only the dreams Madeline had for the hospital, but also her hopes for the daughter she never saw grow up. It talked about the stars she and Lane watched together, about how each constellation told a story of loss and reunion, of love that transcends time and distance. And above all, the letter concluded, "I want you to know that every decision, no matter how painful, was made with love. Lane is an extraordinary man, capable of great compassion and strength. I see these same traits in you, even before your birth. Trust him, allow yourself to be loved, and never doubt that you were, are, and always will be the greatest gift life has given us." When Lane finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the observatory. Madeline Jr., as if feeling the weight of the moment, stretched out her small hands to her mother's face, wiping away her tears with the innocence that only a child possesses. "She knew," Victoria said softly. "Even back then, she knew that one day we'd all be here." The sound of soft music filled the room. The same tune that Madeline Hayes used to hum while working at the hospital. Charlotte had found an old recording and included it in the celebration. "For new beginnings," Rowan proposed, raising his glass of champagne. "And for the dreams that brought us here. For family," Sophia added, "in all its forms. For the legacy of love," Lane added, looking at his granddaughter who was now playing with the sapphire necklace Victoria had placed around her neck. A Thorn tradition passed down to yet another generation. The party continued well into the night, with stories being shared, bonds being strengthened, and new dreams being woven under the same stars that had witnessed Lane and Madeline's love for so long. In the garden of the mansion, a new telescope had been installed, a joint gift from the whole family to Madeline Jr. It was a symbol of continuity, a promise that some stories have no end, only new chapters waiting to be written. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" Rowan commented to Lane, as they watched Sophia teach Madeline how to identify the constellations through the telescope. "How everything fitted together perfectly, as if the universe was just waiting for the right moment. Your mother used to say that the greatest love stories are written in the stars," Lane replied, hugging her daughter. "Some just take a little longer to find their way to us." And so, under the starry Newport sky, the Thorne family celebrated not only the first year of their youngest member, but also the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. It was a story of loss and reunion, of broken dreams and new beginnings, of love that transcends time and circumstance, a unique constellation of moments and people shining eternally in the firmament of their lives.